Once upon a time, there was a woman who had never felt truly safe in her own life. Her name was Clara, and she carried a heaviness inside her chest that most people never noticed. She smiled at the right times, laughed when it was expected, and kept her voice soft so no one would ever think she was difficult. But behind her steady gaze, Clara was always listening for the sound of doors creaking, footsteps following, or whispers that didn't belong to her. It all began on a stormy night in early September. Clara had just moved into a new apartment after leaving behind a breakup that left her fractured. She wanted a fresh start, a clean slate where nobody knew her name, nobody cared about her scars. The building was old, the walls thin, and the hallway lights flickered, as if they were tired of keeping secrets. Clara unpacked boxers slowly, letting memories slip out with each object she touched. A framed photo of her and her ex, Daniel, sat at the bottom of one box. She turned it, face down, heart thumping, as though even the glass frame could still cut her. She made tea, curled up by the window, and told herself she would learn to breathe again. The rain tapped against the glass like impatient fingers, and thunder rolled over the city. That was when she noticed it's someone standing in the courtyard below. A tall figure in a dark coat, unmoving, their face hidden in shadow. Clara blinked hard, leaned closer to the glass, but the figure was gone. She shook her head. Maybe she was tired. Maybe her mind was playing tricks. Still, something in her stomach tightened. The first night in any new home was supposed to feel strange. She convinced herself it was nothing, climbed into bed, and tried to sleep. But just as her eyelids grew heavy, she heard it. 3 slow knocks on her door. Clara froze. The knocks didn't come again, but her breath came sharp and quick. She tiptoed toward the door, pressing her ear against the cool wood. Silence. Not even footsteps fading down the hallway. Her neighbors didn't know her. Nobody had a reason to visit her at midnight. Her hand hovered over the lock, but she couldn't bring herself to open it. She stood there for minutes, hours until her knees ached. Finally, she whispered to herself, "It's just the wind," and she walked away. But deep down, Clara knew the wind didn't knock. If Clara had opened that door, her life would never be the same. But sometimes what you don't see, those things that wait on the other side, can change everything anyway. Keep listening, because the secret she's about to uncover will test every piece of who she is. The next morning, Clara almost convinced herself it hadn't happened. She showered, dressed, and made coffee while the sun poured through her thin curtains. The daylight made everything ordinary again. But when she stepped outside, she noticed something strange. A folded piece of paper had been slipped under her door overnight. Her chest tightened as she bent to pick it up. The paper was damp, as though touched by the rain. On the front, her name was written in bold, messy letters. Clara. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. "You left the photo in the box. Why hide from what you already know?" Her heart slammed in her chest. She stumbled back inside, locking the door, her mind racing. No one had been in her apartment. She was sure of it. The boxers were still sealed, stacked in the corner, and yet the note mentioned the photo of her and Daniel, the one she had hidden at the bottom of the box. Clara's throat went dry. Who knew about that picture? Who could have written this? She read the words again, over and over, until they blurred. She grabbed her phone to call the landlord, but stopped. What would she say? That a stranger had broken in and left a note about her past. It sounded insane. She set the phone down, her hands shaking. That day, she couldn't focus on anything. She tried to distract herself with unpacking, music, even a walk around the block, but every shadow felt heavier, every stranger's face sharper. By the time night returned, she dreaded the silence of her apartment. She double-locked the door, shoved a chair against it, and sat awake on the couch. At 1:13 a.m., the power went out. The room fell into total darkness. Clara's breath hitched, and then the same 3 knocks on her door. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had never felt truly safe in her own life. Her name was Clara, and she carried a heaviness inside her chest that most people never noticed. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at the right times, said all the right things. But if you looked closely, you could see the fear lurking in her eyes, always looking for an escape, always on the run. She moved into a new apartment after a very painful breakup with her boyfriend. It was a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. She hoped that this would be it, the place where she could finally have some peace. But as the days went by, she grew more and more uneasy. Her first night there, she was sitting in her courtyard when she saw a mysterious figure standing across from her. The figure was tall and thin, and it seemed to be watching her. Clara tried to dismiss it, telling herself that it was just her imagination. Then, just as she was about to go inside, she heard 3 slow, heavy knocks on her door. It was midnight. The next morning, she found a damp folded note under her door. It was a piece of paper with her name written on it. The writing was sloppy and the paper was still wet from the rain. It said, "Looking for a hidden photo of you and your ex." Clara's heart raced. Who was this person? How did they get her address? Why were they watching her? She tried to shake off the paranoia, but it was hard. She couldn't focus on her work. She couldn't sleep at night. She started seeing suspicious faces everywhere. Every shadow seemed to be watching her. Every face she passed by seemed to know her. She felt like she was being followed, like someone was always there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for her to let her guard down. And then, in the middle of the night, the power went out. When the darkness hit, she heard the sound she dreaded, the sound that had haunted her nightmares. 3 slow, heavy knocks on her door, and then silence. Was she going crazy? What was happening? Who was out there? If you want to hear the next part of this scary story, stay tuned for more updates. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had never felt truly safe in her own life. Her name was Clara, and she carried a heaviness inside her chest that most people never noticed. She smiled at the rich, laughed at their jokes, and nodded along to their stories. But as soon as they left, her forced smile would fade away, revealing the sadness that lingered on her lips. She moved into a new apartment after a particularly painful breakup. She hoped that a change of scenery would bring her the peace that she so desperately craved. But it didn't, and the unease that had been following her for years seemed to have followed her there too. Her first night in the new apartment was filled with suspense. As she was getting ready for bed, she saw a mysterious figure in the courtyard below. It was dark, and she couldn't make out any details. But the longer she looked, the more the figure seemed to shrink until it eventually disappeared. Shaking off the disturbing vision, she locked her doors and tried to sleep it off. But just as she was drifting off, she heard 3 slow, methodical knocks on her door. She jumped out of bed, her heart pounding, and crept closer to the door. She didn't want to open it, but she couldn't help but peer through the peephole. But when she did, all she saw was the empty hallway and the creeping shadows. She sighed in relief and went back to bed, hoping that her overactive imagination wasn't playing tricks on her. But the next morning, she found a damp, folded note under her door. Her name was written in elegant cursive on the front. When she unfolded it, the message was clear. "I know you were seeing someone behind my back. I have the photo. Meet me tonight, and I'll show you. A shiver ran down her spine. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but the mention of the photo sent a jolt of fear through her. The only person who knew about the photo was her ex. How could someone have gotten their hands on it? Paranoia began to set in. She couldn't focus on her work, her meals, or even her own thoughts. All she could do was pace around her apartment, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door that would bring her nightmare to life. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every face around her a conspiracy. She walked around with a newfound fear, her eyes darting from one spot to another, never quite feeling safe or at peace. Then, in the middle of the night, the power went out. Clara gasped, her heart racing as she fumbled for her phone's flashlight. That's when she heard it, the sound that had haunted her nightmares. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on her door. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had never felt truly safe in her own life. Her name was Clara, and she carried a heaviness inside her chest that most people never noticed. She smiled at the right moments, laughed when things were funny, and looked people in the eye when she talked to them. But underneath it all, she was sure that if the world truly knew what was inside her, it would be ripped to pieces. After a particularly painful breakup, Clara decided to move into a new apartment. She hoped that a fresh start would do her some good, help her forget about the heartache and mend the holes in her soul. The apartment was nice, a little too quiet, but that was exactly what she needed, or so she thought. On her very first night there, as she was getting ready for bed, she saw a mysterious figure in the courtyard. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just a man walking his dog. But something about the way he walked, the way the dog trotted, and the shadows they cast made her uneasy. When she finally went to bed, she heard 3 slow knocks at her door. She jumped out of her skin and instantly regretted not getting a doorstop. Maybe it was just someone trying to break in, she thought. Or maybe it was her overactive imagination. In the morning, though, she found a damp folded note under her door. It read, "Hello, Clara. I know what you're thinking. That photo of you and your ex is really cute. Want me to show you where it is?" The note was clearly written by someone who knew her and knew things about her, things she hadn't told anyone. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She couldn't focus on anything. Every little sound made her jump, and every shadow and face she passed in the street looked suspicious. By the time the sun went down, her anxiety had reached its peak. She hadn't eaten all day, and her mind was running wild. Was she being stalked? Would she ever feel safe again? In the middle of the night, as she lay in bed trying to think of nothing, the power went out. She sat there in the darkness, heart pounding, listening to the wind and the rain. And then she heard it again, 3 slow knocks on her door. But this time, they sounded closer. More sinister to be continued. Now it's time for the moral of the story. What you think about this story? So please, like, share, subscribe, and comments below, so you won't miss any of our new stories. Thank you for watching.